The hall was silent. Hundreds of Zarelians stood with their heads bowed, their silver skin glimmering under the dim blue light. It was not a celebration. It was a surrender dressed as a wedding. Princess Alani of Clan Vareth stood tall beside her human husband-be. Her violet eyes showed no emotion. She had trained herself well. From a distance, she looked proud and calm. But inside, her heart burned with shame and anger. The war had nearly destroyed her people. When the humans landed on their world, the Zarelians had fought fiercely. But human weapons, human ships, and human tactics were something they were not prepared for. In the end, the only way to save what remained of Clan Vareth was to form an alliance. That alliance required a bond. Alani was the chosen sacrifice. She looked at the human beside her. Captain Jacob Rains, tall, broad shoulders, sharp features. His hair was dark, and his expression serious. He stood straight, dressed in the black and silver uniform of the Earth Federation. Silent like a statue, she expected him to smirk. To look at her with hunger or dominance, as the story said. Humans always did. But he only nodded once, when their eyes met and looked away. Strange, the ceremony was short. The Zarelian elder recited the vows. A human officer translated them. Alani said the words as required. Jacob repeated them in a quiet voice. Then, the elder placed a ceremonial ribbon across their joined hands. It was done. She was now bonded to a human, by law, by treaty, by duty. Later, in the quiet chambers prepared for them, Alani waited. Her fingers traced the carved patterns on the walls, trying to calm her thoughts. She turned when she heard the door open. Jacob entered, still wearing his uniform, still serious. He looked around the room, then met her eyes. "I will not stay. Here tonight," he said in a calm voice. "This room is yours." She raised her chin. "Do you fear sharing a room with your new wife?" His face did not change. "No, I respect your right to choose when this marriage becomes real." "I was not given that choice. Neither were you." Alani's brows furrowed. "Then why did you agree to this?" Jacob stepped back toward the door. "Because your people needed peace. And I believe peace is worth more than pride." At that he gave a small bow, almost awkward, and left the room. Alani stood, frozen. She didn't know what to feel. No one had explained this side of humans. Where was the cruelty? Desire to conquer everything, even in marriage. The next day, the people of Vareth whispered, "She remains untouched." One servant said behind a closed curtain, "The human rejects her, another guest. He must find her ugly." Alani heard every word, but said nothing. She walked the palace halls, trying to ignore the looks. At the evening council meeting, Jacob stood beside her before the clan elders. His words were sharp and clear. "Earth does not come to take your land," he said. "We come to build something together. If I am now part of Clan Vareth, then I will protect it as my own." The elders listened. Some nodded. Others remained silent. Alani watched him closely. His hands remained at his sides. He never once reached toward her, never touched her arm, never even looked at her longer than needed. After the meeting, she stopped him outside the hall. "You act like I am a stranger," she said. "Why?" Jacob sighed. "'Cause I am a soldier, not a thief. You were given to me without a choice. I will not take what was never freely offered." She didn't answer. Her mind was too full. That night, she sat on the balcony alone, looking up at the stars. One of those lights up there was Earth, the human homeworld. She tried to imagine it. What kind of world created a man like Jacob Rains? He had all the power, the army, the law, the victory, but he did not use it to bend her. Instead, he gave her space, gave her time. And that, more than anything, began to shake her heart. The days passed slowly inside the stone walls of the Vareth Palace. Alani walked the familiar halls like a shadow. Her steps were light, her face combat. Her mind was always thinking about one person, Captain Jacob. Rains' daughter, human husband. He had not spoken much to her since the wedding. He spent most of his time in the council chamber, in meetings with both human and Zarelian leaders. At night, he returned to his own quarters, always separate, always respectful, always distant. Elani did not understand him. In her childhood, she was told many things about humans. They were aggressive, that they only believed in power. They took what they wanted, even if it was not offered. But Jacob was not like that. He was polite, calm, and strangely quiet. Most of all, he had never tried to touch her. Not even once. Her own people had started whispering. She is not good enough for him, someone muttered near the gardens. Maybe he regrets. The bond, another said. Maybe he only agreed for politics. Elani heard the words even when she tried to block them out. One evening, she decided to find answers. She walked to the west wing of the palace, where Jacob's quarters had been prepared. 2 human guards stood outside the door, but they stepped aside as she approached. She knocked once. The door opened quickly. Jacob stood there, surprised. He wore simple clothing now, not his black uniform. He looked less like a soldier and more like a tired man. "Ilani," he said gently. "Something wrong?" "Yes," she replied. "This silence between us, it's wrong." He moved aside, allowing her in. The room was plain, with only the basics: a bed, a small table, a datapad, and some folded clothes. No decorations, no comfort. She turned to face him. "Ignore me?" "I don't ignore you," Jacob said. "I give you space." "Why?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "You are my husband by law. I am your wife. Why do you act like I am not even here?" Jacob sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting on his knees. "Because this marriage was not your choice. And I don't believe in taking what isn't freely given." Ilani was quiet for a moment. The anger in her chest slowly faded, replaced by confusion. "But most would take what was given by law," she said softly. "Most would not care about the heart." "I do," he said. "My parents were like that. My father waited 5 years before my mother agreed to marry him. He loved her enough to wait." Elani stared at him. His words were simple, but they held deep meaning. "You confuse me," she whispered. Jacob gave a small smile. "I confuse myself sometimes." Across from him, "You do not see me as your wife? I see you as someone who was forced into a role. It doesn't feel right to me. If someday you want to share a life with me, I will be here. But until then, I will not cross that line." Lonnie looked down at her hands. She remembered the ceremony, the binding ribbon. The cold words spoken like a treaty she had never wanted. This marriage, but now she was not sure what she wanted. "Do you hate my people?" she asked quietly. "No," Jacob said. "You fought bravely. You protected your world. I respect that. Even though we killed many of your kind." He nodded slowly. "War makes everyone bleed. Peace gives us the chance to heal. That's what I want." For the first time, Ilani saw him not as a soldier or a human, but as a man carrying a heavy burden. It's like her. She stood up. "Thank you for being honest," she said. "I don't understand you, Jacob Rains, but I think I want to." He rose as well, his eyes steady. "I'll wait as long as it takes," he replied. Without another word, she left his room. The hallway was silent, but something in her heart felt different. He had not touched her. He had not claimed her, but his respect had reached deeper than any hand ever could, and perhaps that was more powerful than anything she had known before. Princess. Ilani walked through the garden paths alone, her thoughts heavier than the silence around her. The marriage bond still rested on her arm as a silver marking, a thin line that shimmered in the sun. A symbol of peace, a reminder of chains. But the man tied to her by that bond, Captain Jacob Rains, was unlike anything she expected. She had begun watching him from a distance, not with hate but with curiosity. He had refused her bed, refused her closeness, but never refused to protect her people. It confused her even more. From a high balcony above the council chamber, Lonnie sat behind a shadowed curtain, observing one of the joint meetings between Earth's officers and Vareth elders. She shouldn't be there. It wasn't her place, but she needed to see. Jacob stood before a long table, arms crossed, speaking calmly. "No, I will not approve heavy mining in the Vareth Mountains," he said firmly. "That land is sacred. To their people, we will find other resources. A tall, Earth Federation officer frowned. Captain, that area holds valuable minerals. We can supply both worlds if we extract it. We are not conquerors, Jacob interrupted. We are allies. If we destroy what they hold dear, then we've lost what this alliance was meant to build. Ailani blinked in surprise. Her people had feared humans would take their lands, their waters, and their skies. But this man, a human leader, stood in their defense not because of her, not because of love, but because it was right. She leaned forward slightly, listening more closely. Another council member, a Zarelian elder named Vakran, spoke. Captain Rain speaks with wisdom. You're not trading one war for another kind of destruction. Jacob nodded. If Vareth falls again, I will not serve as the one who let it happen. My duty is to protect, not to profit. Meeting ended, Jacob stayed behind, organizing papers and speaking softly with a few officers. Ailani watched as he gave a bag of medicine to a young Zarelian messenger. Distribute this to the eastern villages, Jacob said. Tell them. It's from the Earth medical teams. No payment needed. Allah. Annie's chest tightened. Later that day, she found herself walking toward the Earth's relief station near the palace gates. She saw humans and Zarelians working together, lifting crates, scanning medicine, treating the sick, and Jacob was there. Sleeves rolled up, helping carry supplies with his bare hands. She approached quietly. You command, yet you carry boxes? She asked, a small smile on her lips. Jacob turned, a little surprised. Then he smiled too. Leaders should never be afraid to work. She looked at the villagers nearby. Some bowed to her. Others still kept their distance. The fear of humans had not fully faded. You're not like how I imagined, she said honestly. Same for you, Jacob replied. I thought Zarelians were cold. But now, I see you're strong, proud. Loyal Ailani nodded slowly. Those are the only things that kept us alive. They walked together toward a shaded bench. Why do you care so much about Vareth? She asked. Jacob looked out across the hills. 'Cause I was once like them. My colony on Mars was nearly destroyed in a supply war, and no one came to help. So when I see people struggling, I remember how it felt to be forgotten. His words sank deep into her heart. You don't see yourself as a hero? She asked. He chuckled softly. No, I just don't like bullies, even if they wear my uniform. Ailani studied his face in the quiet light. He did not try to charm her. He did not speak grand words. It was just sincere, and that was more rare than gold. Your silence in the palace, she said softly. I thought it was rejection. I thought you were ashamed of me. Jacob looked at her seriously. Never. I was giving you space. You've had everything taken from you. I didn't want to take more. Ailani's voice dropped. And if I no longer wanted space, Jacob said nothing at first. Then gently he spoke. Then I would be honored. A warm breeze passed between them, carrying the scent of Zarelian flowers. For the first time since the ceremony, Ailani didn't feel like a prisoner in her own life. She felt like something new was beginning, not out of force, not out of duty, but from a seed of trust, growing slowly into something greater. The sun was just beginning to rise over Vareth when the sky turned dark with smoke. Ailani stood on the palace balcony, staring at the eastern mountains. Thick clouds were rising in the distance. She could smell burning wood. Her heart dropped. Those are our border villages, she whispered. Within moments, alarms rang through the palace. Guards rushed through the halls. The council was called into emergency session. Ailani didn't wait for a summons. She ran straight to the command room, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her. Inside, human and Zarelian officers gathered around a large holomap. Red dots blinked near the village line. Jacob was already there, fully suited in combat armor, helmet under his arm. His jaw was tight, eyes focused. They've come, he said as she entered. A rogue Zarelian faction, the Iron Crest. They never accepted the treaty. Ailani clenched her fists. They believe I've weakened the clan by marrying a human. Jacob nodded. They want to destroy the treaty. And you. She stepped closer. Then we must fight back. An Earth Federation officer spoke up. Captain Rains, we've contacted command. They want to wait for permission before engaging. Jacob's voice turned cold. "If we wait, people will die." "But it's not our battle," the officer argued. "Our orders are to protect only Earth personnel." Alani's heart sank. She looked at Jacob, expecting hesitation, but he turned toward the map, slammed his fist down, and said, "I'm not letting anyone die under my watch, Zarelian or human. Suit up the team. I'm leading the defense mission myself." Everyone went silent. Then the officer nodded. "Understood, sir." Lonnie stepped forward. "Jacob, you could be court-martialed for this." He looked at her calmly. "Some rules are worth breaking, especially when innocent lives are at risk." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Just placed a hand gently on his armor, near his heart. "Then may your path be protected." Jacob gave her a small smile. "Keep the council calm. If we win this fight, we keep the peace alive." Within the hour, dropships lifted off from the palace landing pads. Heading east, Ilani waited in the war chamber. Watching the live feeds, the Iron Crest attackers had already burned 2 villages and taken hostages. Their fighters wore dark armor with jagged helmets and red markings, symbols of rebellion. But then, through the smoke, Jacob's squad arrived. What happened next was something Vareth would speak of for generations. Captain Jacob Rains led the charge, not from behind, but at the very front. His armor shone like a star in the ash-filled sky. His orders were clear and fast. He directed human soldiers to rescue civilians while he and a few Zarelian guards fought the rebels head-on. He moved like a trained weapon, fast, smart, unstoppable. At one point, a rebel war beast, a large armored creature, charged toward a group of trapped villagers. Jacob leapt onto its back, drove his blade between its armored plates, and brought it down alone. Back in the palace, Ilani gripped the edge of the table, her heart racing as she watched the footage. "He's fighting for them, like he's one of us," whispered an elder beside her. Another added, "I never believed a human would bleed for Vareth." When the battle ended, the rebels fled. Several were captured. Hostages were freed. And Jacob, bruised, burned, but alive, carried a young Zarelian boy out of the ruins with his own arms. Cheers broke out in the palace war chamber. The people of Vareth had seen the truth with their own eyes. This human did not come to rule. He came to protect. Later, as the sky turned red with sunset, Jacob returned to the palace. His armor was scratched, his face tired, but his eyes still held fire. Ilani ran to meet him in the courtyard. "You disobeyed orders," she said, half smiling. "I'd do it again," he replied, smiling back. Then her tone softened. "You saved my people. You risked everything for them." "They're my people too," he said quietly. She looked into his eyes. "No one will call you an outsider now. Not after today." Jacob shrugged. "I didn't do it for glory." "I know," she whispered. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by ash and fading light, something shifted between them, not in duty, not in law, but in trust and loyalty, in something much deeper. He had proven more than his strength. He had proven his heart. Days after the battle, peace returned to Vareth. The smoke had cleared. The wounded were treated. The children played again in the palace courtyards. But something deeper had also changed. The people no longer whispered about Captain Jacob Rains behind closed doors. Now, they greeted him with respect. Some even called him Shield of Vareth. Ilani watched all of this with quiet wonder. Every time Jacob passed, she noticed how her people looked at him, not with fear, but with trust. He had fought for them. He had bled for them. And he had never asked for anything in return. One morning, Ilani stood before her mirror. She wore a soft blue robe, her clan's color. Her silver armband, the symbol of her forced marriage, still rested on her skin. She touched it lightly. It was time to choose. Jacob stood on the training grounds behind the palace. He was helping to young guards with defense tactics, demonstrating how to counter heavier weapons with speed. His sleeves were rolled up, his arms marked with scratches from the recent battle. He moved with calm focus. Teaching patiently, Ilani approached him slowly. The guards quickly stepped aside when they saw her. Jacob turned, wiping sweat from his brow. His expression softened. "Ilani," he said with a smile, "what brings you here?" She didn't answer right away. She looked around. The air was warm, birds were singing, and for the first time in months, it was peace. Then she looked at him. "I need to speak with you alone." Jacob nodded. "Let's walk." They strolled through the garden paths in silence. Ilani took deep breaths, steadying herself. When they reached a quiet spot near the water fountain, she stopped. He turned to face her. "What is it?" he asked gently. She looked into his eyes, her voice calm but sure. "Jacob, you know the tradition of the second bond?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. It's the true bond. It's the one that comes by will, not by treaty. In Zarelian law," she continued, "a forced marriage can be broken if the chosen one offers a second bond by heart, not by duty." Jacob's expression changed. His brows lifted slightly, unsure where this was going. Ilani took a step closer. "You gave me time. You gave me space. And in that space, I learned who you are." She gently removed the silver band from her arm and let it fall into her hand. "This," she said, holding it up, "was given in war." Then she reached into her robe and pulled out a small blue ribbon, woven with her clan's crest. "This," she said, "I give by choice." Offered it to him with both hands, her eyes never leaving his. Jacob stood still, his heart pounding. He looked down at the ribbon, then back at her. "You're sure?" he asked softly. Ilani nodded. "I am. Not because the treaty says so, because I see the man you are, strong, kind, honest. Because I wish to walk beside you, not just as a symbol, but as your partner." Jacob took the ribbon with slow hands. His voice was quiet. "I never expected this." "I know," she said with a small smile. "That's why it's real." He gently tied the ribbon around his wrist, like a vow. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud, but it was more powerful than any ceremony. Ilani stepped closer. "I was given to you in silence. Today I give myself in freedom." Jacob looked into her eyes, soft, proud, glowing with strength. "I accept," he said. "And I promise to protect, honor, and never control what is freely given." They stood in silence for a moment, two people from different worlds, finally united not by command, but by choice. That evening, the news spread quickly through the palace. The princess has offered the second bond. By her own heart. The human captain is now her true husband. In the great hall, the elders gathered. Some looked surprised, others smiled. Even the oldest counselor, who once doubted the treaty, stood and said, "Perhaps the stars knew what we did not." Later, that night, Ilani and Jacob stood on the palace balcony together. The wind was soft and the stars were bright. "You could have claimed me long ago," she said. "I never wanted to win you like that," he replied. She touched his hand gently. "That's why you did." Now, for the first time since their bond was formed, she rested her head against his shoulder, not in duty, not in fear, but in quiet peace. The bond between Ilani and Jacob had changed everything, no longer just a symbol of peace. Their marriage had become a true partnership. Ilani stood proudly beside Jacob in meetings, and Jacob defended both Earth and Vareth with equal strength. Whispers of doubt had faded. Even the elders, once cautious, now called them the twin shields. But peace has enemies, in the shadows. Of both worlds, not everyone was happy. Some powerful leaders from Earth believed Jacob had gone too far. "He's more Zarelian than human now," one general said. "He disobeyed orders and protects alien lands like they're his own." At the same time, bitter Zarelian warlords still called Ilani a traitor. "She married the enemy. She walks with him. She cannot be trusted." And in the dark, these voices joined hands. A secret message was intercepted by Jacob's team. Spoke of a plot, an assassination, not just of the captain, but of the princess too. Someone wanted to end the alliance forever. Jacob met Ilani in their private chamber that night. His face was serious. "There's danger," he said. They planned to strike during the peace ceremony in the mountain temple. In two. "Deus," Ilani replied. "The treaty signing," he nodded. They want to break us, not just as leaders, but as a symbol. Alani did not flinch. Then let us give them a symbol of unity they cannot destroy. Deep pride. We'll face it together. The mountain temple was ancient, carved into stone cliffs with glowing vines hanging down its walls. Leaders from many worlds had gathered there to celebrate the new era. Alani wore her ceremonial robes, silver and blue, with her clan crest over her heart. Jacob wore a black and gold formal uniform with a Zarelian ribbon tied on his wrist. They stood side by side as the sun began to rise, but danger was near. Jacob had placed hidden guards around the temple. His most trusted soldiers were watching every path, every shadow. Still, the enemy was clever, disguised as monks too. Attackers moved through the crowd with silent steps. One held a plasma dagger. The other carried a hidden bomb device. Their orders were clear: destroy the bond that held this piece together. As the ceremony began, Alani spoke before the crowd. Today we do not forget the past, she said. We choose to shape the future together. Jacob stepped forward. This piece was born not from strength, but from respect, and it will be defended the same way. At that moment, the attackers made their move. From the side walkway, the first assassin rushed forward, dagger raised toward Alani's back. Jacob reacted instantly. He moved between the blade and his wife, grabbing the attacker's arm and twisting. The dagger fell, and Jacob struck with his fist, knocking the man to the floor. Gasps filled the temple. The second attacker tried to activate the bomb, but Flanani was ready. She spun around and threw her ceremonial staff. It struck the device, knocking it from the attacker's hand. Guards rushed in, capturing both would-be killers. The ceremony was stopped. Confusion and fear spread among the crowd. Jacob stood before them, his voice calm but strong. This, he said, pointing at the attackers, is what fear looks like. It hides in shadows. It tries to silence what it cannot understand. He turned to Alani and took her hand. But this bond is what hope looks like. Alani lifted their joined hands high. You may strike at us, she said, but you cannot break what is built on truth. The people cheered. Even the doubtful ones saw now that their unity was not weak, it was unshakable. Later that evening, as the stars appeared, Alani and Jacob stood on the mountain cliff, watching the winds dance. I'm sorry you had to face this, Jacob said softly. I'm not, Alani replied. You stood beside me, and now I will never step back. He turned to her. They'll try again. She nodded. Let them. We are no longer just symbols. We are something stronger than fear, he smiled. Together? Together, she said, their fingers entwined, and in the quiet night, surrounded by stars and peace hard won. They stood side by side, not as two rulers from different worlds, but as one heart, one will, one future. The wind on the capital's high hill was calm, but the hearts of the people were full of energy. Banners of Earth and Verith flew side by side. Thousands had gathered in the great courtyard to witness something more important than any treaty, a moment that would shape both worlds for generations. At the center stood Princess Alani and Captain Jacob Rains. They no longer looked like strangers, their eyes met with quiet strength. They had stood against war, betrayal, and fear, and still stood together. Today, they would speak not just as husband and wife, but as leaders of peace. Alani stepped forward first. She wore royal armor mixed with human design, silver plates with a deep blue cape. Her voice was clear and steady. There was a time when I was given to a man I did not know. A time when I thought my future had been taken from me. But today, I stand here not as someone given, but as someone who has chosen. She looked at Jacob with deep respect. I chose him not because of war, not because of politics, but because of the strength in his heart, because in silence, he showed patience. In anger, he showed kindness. And in danger, he stood between me and death. The crowd was silent, listening closely. Jacob stepped beside her. His uniform was sharp, but his voice was gentle. When I first arrived on Verith, I was seen as a weapon, as an outsider, but this world showed me something greater. It showed me courage, loyalty, and the kind of honor that cannot be taught, only lived. He turned to Eilani. You were never my enemy. You were never my burden. You were my equal from the start. I just waited for you to see it. People across the courtyard, human and Zarelian alike, wiped quiet tears from their eyes. Then, together, Eilani and Jacob held up a small scroll. It was the final peace document signed by both worlds, sealed with their names. But they added one more signature, one not required by law. Alani's younger brother, a boy saved by Jacob during the mountain village attack, stepped forward. His hands shook, but he signed his name at the bottom, representing the next generation. The message was clear. This peace was not just between rulers, but for all. As the scroll was lifted, the crowd burst into applause. Flags waved. Flowers rained from balconies. Children laughed and danced. But it was what happened next that truly marked the beginning of a new era. Eilani stepped forward and with calm grace took Jacob's hand in front of everyone. The first time she had done so openly then, without force, without pressure. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his, a gesture of deep bond in Zarelian. Culture Jacob returned it with quiet pride. There were no cheers during that moment, only silence. The kind of silence that comes from deep respect. Days turned into weeks, and the story of their journey spread across both planets. Villages once torn by war began to rebuild, not as Earth colonies or Zarelian strongholds, but as shared homes. Trade improved. Schools opened that taught both languages. Eilani and Jacob ruled not as two voices but as one. She handled council traditions. He led with fairness and clear strategy. Where one was unsure, the other stood firm. When new problems rose, as they always did, they faced them as a team. Enemies still whispered in the dark, but the people no longer listened. The people had seen what true unity looked like. One quiet evening, Eilani and Jacob walked through the palace gardens. The stars above looked brighter. The air was full of spring warmth. Eilani. He picked a small flower from a nearby vine and placed it behind Jacob's ear. He laughed. What's this for? For being the first man who won my heart without ever trying to take it? He smiled, brushing her cheek. You were never mine to take. You were always free. I was just lucky enough to be chosen. They sat together on the stone bench where they had once spoken in silence. But now silence was no longer empty. It was full of memories, trust, and quiet love. I used to fear this marriage, Eilani whispered. And now? Jacob asked. Now, she said, leaning against his shoulder, I see it wasn't just a marriage. It was the start of a future no war could destroy. He nodded. Not just a marriage, a legacy. They sat like that beneath the stars. As two worlds moved forward, not behind swords or flags, but behind the quiet power of two hearts that had chosen each other.